Okay, now in your program, it says a dialogue between E. Randol Schoenberg and NoreenGreen conductor. So, the first thing we need to do is to invite Mr. Randol Schoenberg out, who is the grandson of Eric Zeisl and our next feature composer. I'm bringing up some little notes and stuff for us to play with. See if your mic's working. You gotta turn it on.
No? Yes?
Randy's been a little ill for the last 4 days. He has barely a voice, so I'm going to do a lot of the talking. Eric Zeisl. Tell us who Eric Zeisl was.
Eric Zeisl is my mother's father.
And Mom's in the audience.
There.
Where's Barbara?
She has the camera up there.
Hi, Barbara.
He was born in Vienna in 1905 and escaped when he was 33 years old in 1938 with my grandmother on the day after Kristallnacht from Vienna, first to Paris, and then a year later to New York, where my mother was born, and then a few years later out to Los Angeles. So they were here by around 1942.
And he was a composer while he was living in...
Yes, he was from pretty much childhood on a composer. He had gone to the academy, I guess against his parents' wishes, already as a 14-year-old, and studied in Vienna, had composed 100 songs and string quartet and light opera and orchestral pieces, all before he had to leave Vienna. And then after coming here to America, he worked on a number of films, including Lassie Comes Home, and The Postman Always Rings Twice, and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde Meet Abbott and Costello, or something like that. But never got a screen credit. The way things worked in those days is they had sort of a factory of emigre composers, many of whom, Noreen, you have helped perform, and so the music was divided up among this group of composers, and so he would have a few pieces in each film, but never got a screen credit. He then was composer in residence at Brandeis Bardeen Institute up in Simi Valley when that opened up in the late 40s, and then taught at LA City College, taught composition to a number of people who went on to become quite famous.
In addition to his film composition, I mean, he was a classical composer, and he taught composition, and he worked for some very famous composers. Mio, he was known by Mio and Stravinsky, and of course Schoenberg, Arnold Schoenberg. And at Brandeis, if you know the camp up there, when it first started, it was really a creative force for music and for art and for dance. And in addition to Eric Zeisl being up there, there was Benjamin Zemach. And Zemach was a very famous choreographer and stager of plays, and he was also working up at Brandeis. And it was his idea to come up with these biblical ballets. And actually, Jacob and Rachel was the second ballet that they did together. It was commissioned by the University of Judaism at that time, correct?
I think it was commissioned by New York Arts Foundation, but it was supposed to be for the University of Judaism, where Zemach was teaching. And they had, the first ballet was Nablus Vineyard, and then they did a ballet which was supposed to be a little smaller in Forces, and that was Jacob and Rachel. That's the piece we're going to hear tonight.
And this is a world premiere. So what happened is he was commissioned to write the music. He wrote the music, they did the staging. Actually, Zemach came up with the story, and then Eric Zeisl wrote the music, and they had the money for the score and the parts, but then they ran out of money and it was never performed. And I wanted, 50 years later, well, 1954 was written.
Right, so it's 55 years later now. 5 years after that, my grandfather died of a heart attack very suddenly after teaching at LA City College, and so he left behind quite a lot of unperformed, unpublished works. A piano concerto that's only recently been performed and recorded, a cello concerto which was only performed at his memorial service, these ballets, and a number of chamber works and other works. And my grandmother who lived right in this area also, kept all the manuscripts together, and in the 70s she showed them to a Professor Malcolm Cole, who was here in the audience also, who wrote the book on Zeisl in the 1980s, and that's really helped spur a little bit of a renaissance. So since his book came out, there have been a number of recordings and performances, culminating in this one here today, which I'm very, very happy to be able to experience.
Well, this is a project that Randy and I have been talking about for a number of years. Randy is on our board, the LA Jewish Symphony Board, and it's been kind of his dream to have these biblical ballets staged and at least heard, and we're very, very lucky to be joining with Body Traffic, which is a new modern dance company. And the story is Jacob and Rachel, which I'm sure most of you know from the Bible. There's the sister Rachel and Leah, and they get mixed up on purpose. And you'll actually hear the story because we have it really. It's very well laid out, I think, the story. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the themes and how it goes from being a manuscript to being played by an orchestra. And this is actually Zeisl's handwriting. And this is what it looks like, a piano score. And we're very lucky that Zeisl actually played the piano for like a dance rehearsal tape. So we had an idea of the tempos that he wanted from this tape. And this is also what the score looked like, the handwritten score. Now, obviously, I don't know if you can see, but it's impossible to read unless you have a microscope. So then you need to take this and either copy it by hand neatly, or now we have computers. And we were very fortunate to have Gabor Lukin, who's in the audience here, who has spent almost, I don't know how many months, almost a year, taking this manuscript with all its enharmonics and putting it into a form that we can perform. And then this is the conductor score that I get to see. This beautiful computer score. See? So that's the difference, and that's what the players get to see. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the themes. Eric Zeisl's compositional style, he even says himself he was kind of stuck in the old world back in Vienna, and when he came out here, he didn't really get into the new style of the 40s and 50s of performance. But his craft is so ingenious, and he will take themes and combine them. So I wanted to just give you a sense of the themes. The opening theme is called Promises, and Promises is the promise that God makes to Jacob that for generations and generations he will have children, and they will multiply like the sands and the stars and the seas. I don't know the exact quote. So this is the first thing that you hear, and if you hear it, it sounds like promises. Promises. Okay. Let's see, the next theme I'm going to do is the God theme, because God comes out and you'll hear God singing the theme with these words, and Barry's going to be God. Now we have the Rachel theme. It's actually, I call it the Rachel and the Jacob theme, because it's really their love theme. And that's going to be played by, who's playing the Jacob? Oh, concertmaster. And you hear that, isn't that a beautiful theme? And you hear that in all sorts of connotations. You hear it happy and fast, you hear it very sad and lamented by the English horn, depending on what the mood is that Zeisl is trying to portray. Then we have the evil sister, which is Leah, and she's very jealous of Rachel and her beauty. And she comes in with this dance of jealousy, and the clarinet's going to be the Leah. More melancholy theme. When you hear the whole orchestra play, it's almost scary. And then the other character, the main character, is of course Laban. And Laban is the father of the two girls, and he's the one who makes the little switcheroo between Rachel and Leah. And this is Laban's theme, and it's played by the trumpet. Whenever you hear that, that's either Laban's household or Laban's theme as he comes in. Now, the whole ballet was staged for a troupe, I don't know, 100 performers, and we even have sketches from what it was supposed to look like. And with the economy the way it is, obviously we're not going to stage it here with 100 dancers, but we're so fortunate to have Body Traffic, and Tina and Lillian, who are our co-directors, have put together an incredible representation of this story, and I think you're in for a wonderful show. And does anybody have any questions before we take a break? Yeah, it's partly choreographed, so you're going to see dance representation for some things and just orchestra for another thing. And one thing that's going to jump out at you is you're going to hear a scream coming out of nowhere, and that scream actually foreshadows the part where Leah comes in and is switched with Rachel the bride, and it foreshadows that at the wedding ceremony. So, just so you know what that scream's about.
I wanted to say thank you also to Noreen for doing this. I think she's given you an idea of what goes into a world premiere. It's not every day that we have world premieres here in Los Angeles, and certainly when you take a piece of music composed 55 years ago by a composer who died 50 years ago, it's a real undertaking. So anyway, I want to thank Noreen for putting this all together. As always, she's done a great job.
We're going to take a short intermission. You have your program you can read. We have donation envelopes because, as you can imagine, in our economy, we just write Zeisl on there and it will go towards helping us out. And I think you're going to really enjoy